And I'm your host today. My name again is Meg Inglis, and then we have Kim Conroe, who is the immediate past president, and she will be monitoring the chat function. And before we even get started, I want to say that no effort like this can ever occur without a bunch of people behind the scenes working on it. And I particularly want to thank Linda Knowles, because she's the backbone of the Spring Symposium and has been doing it for many, many years. So thank you, Linda, for everything that you've done for this program. And then Bill Hopkins is going to be putting our recordings up on YouTube. So that should be available to us in about a week. Okay, we would like to start our Spring Symposium with Kathy Zarsky. Kathy is going to give us a presentation on conservation and education, the varied habitats of Westcave. And in her role as nature to neighborhood manager at Westcave Outdoor Discovery Center, Kathy joins a team of conservation and environmental scientists, biologists, educators, and collaborators to develop new programming and partnerships to bridge the gap between communities and nature. Our aspiration is to explore and share the genius of nature in Central Texas, to inspire new paradigms for nature and place-based education for children, and nature-aligned solutions and innovations for communities. Nature continually adapts to maintain conditions conducive for life, and Kathy believes we all have the capacity to emulate these strategies in the places we live. And I just want to say I live about 5 miles away from Westcave Preserve, and it is really, if you ever get a chance to go visit Westcave Preserve, I encourage you to do it. It's a pristine example of the Balcones Canyonlands ecoregion, and it's just lovingly and beautifully restored over 40 years, from 40 years ago when the hippies used to go and drink beer on the side of the grotto. So, but it's beautiful now, lovingly restored, as I said, and I really encourage you to go visit it.
Well, good morning. I am glad I'm not the only one that really is craving to see this site with the lush colors. We have another gray sky day, warmer temperatures, but we know that the conditions are changing to bring about a lot of color and fluttering in the air and bird song. Bird song is already starting to come back in a pretty profound way where I am and out at Westcave over the last week or so. So yes, I'm also a biomimicry specialist. So just to kind of explain what that means is I actually am much more interested in looking at strategies that the living world has adapted over 3.8 billion years. I know that there are going to be many on the call much more knowledgeable about a lot of the plants and things that you will see on this slide. And so I'm still a humble student, and but I still think we're going to have a really exciting kind of interaction this morning as I go through my slides. So I want to start with the history of Westcave, which really, predates the dates that you see here on this slide. We know that people have been in this area for over 15,000 years. And when the settlers first arrived, we had Tonkawa, Apache, Comanche, and other indigenous peoples that had settled here and really managed the land in a way that kept the land thriving. There was a very symbiotic relationship with people and place. But with Westcave, when we want to get to how did Westcave come to be the preserve that it is today, it really starts to date back to the early 1900s as people were coming up across this area and discovering all of the hidden treasures that the topography yields here. In the 1930s through the 1960s, we know that there was quite a bit of trespassing going on to Westcave as people found this beautiful, iconic sort of plunge pool, rich with emerald greens and beautiful daylighting. Come at the right time of day in the morning, you see cascades of rainbows coming through the waterfall. It's a really magical place. But some of these trespassers all, were starting to realize in the 1960s what damage just their presence was doing as they were compressing the soil, damaging plants, littering everywhere, cutting down trees for bonfires, on and on and on. One of those trespassers was John Watts, seen here on the right. In 1973, he purchased Westcave, the first initial canyon section of acreage, because he was just heartbroken over the place being loved to death. And one of the first big moves he made was to hire John Arns. And I know many of you here have probably met these two individuals. John Arns, unfortunately, I've never had the chance to meet, but he's legendary. Because he really did bring some pretty innovative educational aspects to his conservation work when he first started. In 1976, Westcave became a nonprofit. And in 1983, LCRA and Westcave become partners. LCRA establishing a lease condition where Westcave leases back over 100 years. We still have many, many, many years to go. In 1996, the Balcones Canyonlands Preserve is established. I'm going to show a map just for those of you that might not be familiar with the coverage of the Balcones Canyons Preserve, but it establishes many additional partnering relationships for monitoring and so forth. On our site, we have a beautiful education learning center, the Warren Scoren Environmental Learning Center, opened in 2003. It was a national award winner at the time that the Committee on the Environment was beginning to recognize the importance of green buildings, and it's a pioneering green building that is still just as spectacular as ever. In 2008, we purchased a 45-acre section of the Uplands, a really important purchase for the property because it is sort of that recharge area where the rain is sinking into the soil and really providing the spring discharge that is the sort of the fuel, the battery for our grotto. And in 2018, we officially changed the name from Westcave Preserve to Westcave Outdoor Discovery Center. So just to give a sense of the watershed and where Westcave is within this relationship, Hines Branch Creek is the creek that starts in the upland section, falls into our canyon, and then exits and hits the Pedernales River. This is an image from our fantastic book, Discovering Westcave, and I'll share a link here at some point if Meg doesn't beat me to it. And some of what this area really endures to give people a sense of, these places really are shaped by, all of these erosive forces. So the picture on the left, this is a photo from sometime in the late 1880s by William Oliphant. He was a photographer in the area and was one of those, early people in the area to discover this. And you can see the extent of debris and things that were in there before the trespassing really kind of let loose. And then the flood of 1952 on the right, where we know the Pedernales River rose at least 50 feet, if not 70, and really, created a lot of devastation to all of the cypress trees growing along that riverbank. And of course, with the Hines Branch Creek that drains into it, it would not have risen as fast. So that the river would have backflowed back up the canyon into the grotto and added to all of the weathering processes taking place. Additional things that we think about and are concerned about in the hill country all over the place, not just Westcave, but is the ongoing land fragmentation. This is just a representation of one more piece of property up for sale and what happens to that land when it's purchased. We bring heavy equipment, we compact it, we clear out a lot of trees, we clear out a lot of habitat, range for roaming and water flows, courses, all of these things start to change. And we threaten endangered species like the Goldencheek Warbler that really depend on our native habitat. They are solely dependent on the ash juniper for its bark to make their nests. They will have 1 to 2 clutches each season when they come up, and we are expecting to see them any day. The males come up a little early, scout the area. They're soon joined by the females. You can see the male on the left, the female on the right. She just doesn't have quite the same distinction and kind of polish to her features. You can see that nice stripe with the male's eye band there. And then you can see one of those nests, which is this collection of, primarily the ash juniper bark with some twigs all bound together with spider webs. It's a pretty brilliant little little home for them to start their families before they migrate back into Central America later in the summer. And so Westcave isn't the only place that shares the concerns for what's happening with land fragmentation, habitat loss, watershed changes. So the Balcones Canyon Lands Preserve, created in 1996, primarily for the protection of 8 endangered species, including the Goldencheek warbler and 27 species of concern. It's one of the nation's largest urban preserves with over 33,000 acres or 50 square miles. You can see it's like a Swiss cheesy, composition of preserve, but that's because it's comprised of over 140 individual tracts with multiple private and public stakeholder groups. So 80% of it's managed by the Blacklands Canyon Preserve, which Travis County and the city of Austin are those two entities, and then 20% by the other entities like Westcave or private landowners that are part of the preserve. And down here, you can see there's a little vignette in the left-hand corner of the map that depicts Hamilton Pool in maroon and Westcave in blue, because they're so far off to the right, separated from the rest of what you're seeing in that main map. And so here's just a bit of a close-up to show those two pieces of land side by side. For those of you by chance that might not have been to Westcave Preserve, the drive out, as Meg indicated earlier, is really quite fantastic. You have this beautiful little hairpin turn once you pass Hamilton Pool Road. And then you have Westcave as you come up the hill on your right. So the area depicted in the darker purple is the original property that John Watson purchased in 1973. And then the additional uplands procurement that surrounds it to bring the property to the 76 acres that it is today. And I did just put a note in here too, that at the close to the end of last year, Travis County purchased an additional 3,000 plus acres around the Hamilton Pool area to keep in conservation easement, so that we're all continuing to kind of be cognizant of the rapid rate of growth that's happening out in the hill country. And so this is the image. This is what everyone thinks of when they think of Westcave. It is that magical ooh la la kind of place when you come down there. This is like at its lushest, right? You get a glimpse of how the daylight or the light, kind of sets off this rainbow of colors. We have pops of color with the columbine. You can see lush fern growth. It can be much more lush than this. It just all depends. The pool reflecting the water. But I am one of those people that finds it just as magical when everything is dormant in the winter, because now you have this heightened sense of smell and you're really kind of tuning into a lot of other senses. This is very visual. When you come down here, at a moment like this, we are, when it comes to our senses, 80% of how we kind of take cues from our environment is through our sight. So this is like a visual, rich, kind of like screen of candy that you're looking at right now. But there's so much more to the canyon, and really visiting and over different times of the year is a great way to tap into all of those senses that, we used to rely on a whole lot more to have a deep intelligence about place. So, but because it is such an inspiring place and it has been preserved, we really want to share that practice of helping others understand that they can enjoy and protect nature. And we do this through education, programs, collaborative alliances, and the conservation of this acreage. So when you first come on site, one of the first things you'll see is our award-winning Warren Scoren Environmental Learning Center. It is really quite beautiful. And sadly, it has been close to the public for really the duration of the pandemic. A lot of things have changed for all of us. We are so happy to be returning to stage 2. We're making plans as quickly as we can to be able to open it back up. We have had selective openings here and there for field trips when we know we've been in a space where we can protect and people are safe, a couple of private events, but by and large, the building has been closed, and we're really excited to be able to share it with you all again. So things that I can just tell you generally about Westcave that are pretty exciting is how, what's there. We know that we have over 170 species of birds that we've been able to track, 459 species of plants, 20 Barbary species, 25 plus mammals, 24 reptiles, and over 12 species of snakes. The other things, which aren't photographs, which are little cartoony caricatures, are the things that we know are there that we still need to do better job monitoring. Not that we don't interact and have different citizen science projects that that help us to understand them, but we don't have the same degree of knowledge about their numbers and their role in the overall sort of composition of the place. So those things include the spiders. We do have a couple of endangered harvestmen that we've identified in our caves, the bat species that have been on site. We have been watching a tricolored bat that's made its home in our cave over the winter. We have all kinds of butterflies. Of course, we do the monarch way stations, insects, galore. We are doing a mycology walk and getting more involved with the Central Texas Mycology Society so that we can start to really kind of assess some of the things that we don't understand about how robust the mycological world is on our site. Amphibians, we do a frog watch, but we still have a lot of information to gather there. And of course, the fish that we have on site, where again, we do have some intelligence, but not the same level of data. So arriving on Westcave is arriving to the uplands. And the uplands is this environment, as I mentioned earlier, really critical to the overall watershed component of the site. This is where everything courses. But this is really what we become most familiar with when we drive through the hill country. This is what we see. The canyons are hidden from view. But what we see out in these Oakland ash juniper savannas are really landscape systems shaped by all of these elements. They have a lot of exposure to the wind, fire, which used to be, happen more naturally with interactions from indigenous peoples in a way that really kind of contained those fires and was done in really healthy ways. Of course, the way that it interacts with our rainfall and the temperature differences as a result of all of this. This is a much more exposed, much more vulnerable habitat, and you can see how it's really ended up shaping it over time. To the right, you can see the map that takes you from our Environmental Learning Center to the uplands. We have a connecting series of trails that in length are about 1.5 miles, and we have a couple bird stations and some other things that you can do. We're getting ready to put up some signage as well to give a little bit more information about our prairie savanna. And some of the habitat that you can see here are some of my favorites. The velvet leaf senna, when you have plants on site that you can just, walk up to and interact with as if they're pets, like this is one of those tactile plants that just, don't touch them on our site, but it's one of those plants that I feel is a treasure in our native plant community because of its leaf traits. We have the roadrunner, we have the 9-banded armadillo, we have the antelope horn milkweed all over that we seed in our fields as well for the monarchs as they're coming through. Some additional plants that you can see, just that smattering of color that we expect to see here soon. Some of these are more fall colors with the gay feather, but really excited to see this big showy display that we do. And we do have an upcoming wildflower walk, which I'll have a date for you at the end coming up later this month for those of you that want to come out and see what this year brings. No 2 years are ever the same. So before we go and descend into the canyon, just to give a glimpse of the two different ecosystems side by side and how they differ, and again, kind of the way that geology plays a role in this place. So this is a depiction in spring where we have the ash juniper, an immature tree really acting more in its kind of pioneering behavior next to an evergreen sumac. Down at the bottom, we've got a chinkapin oak. We have a large deadfall right now of a chinkapin oak that happened oh gosh, a year, 2 years ago. It's happened prior to me coming on board. Our majestic bald cypress and all of the little critters that are sharing the space with it, the chatterbox orchid and a number of other species that are in the canyon. Another wonderful image from the book Discovering Westcave. Chris Karen, Elaine Davenport have been wonderful resources to Westcave. We still see them on site rather frequently, just lovely. And we're so appreciative for all of the things that they have lent to our site and our organization. They have a great illustration in the book that kind of shares some of these same ideas. This is my quick and dirty way of interpreting that, since I couldn't get a digital version of it. But you can see how the geography of place really creates this ability for, with the water that's already in the canyon and the way that the breezes tend to blow over the canyon, protected again by the canopy of the trees, creates a settling of cool in the canyon where we can experience a 10-degree difference at the bottom of the canyon from the uplands in the summertime. So it's really quite lovely. It can also get quite humid. And so when we don't have a breeze, you definitely want to come down there with a fan. And so we descend. This is what that initial descent looks like on the left. We have roughly 125 stairs going down. It is some of the stairs are a little steep. There's a lot of tree roots like you see on the right, which are also just, I find, fantastic encounters along the trail. Not only do you have to watch your step, but you really have to appreciate the way that our plants have established themselves here and the contortionist abilities that they have both in the sky and in the ground to thrive in place. And when we get down into the canyon, towards that nick point where we see our grotto and where we have our plunge pool, we really start to understand the importance of the geology and the fact that we have living rocks surrounding us with springs that are seeping, pockets for plants, a lot of biomass accumulation with insects and all kinds of things, really kind of contributing to the richness of the nutrient loading that sustains this place. Again, lots of water. This is a constant flow environment in our canyon where we see the grotto in particular. Always at the edge of the canyon where we have this waterfall condition, you'll always find some dripping. The canyon edges, as we start to recede away, may become drier over time. But last summer, if you all remember, we had a lot of rain and our canyons seeped and seeped and seeped. And so in this middle picture where you see people congregating, we have an area where people kind of wait and we rotate them through these different stations where they can go behind the waterfall in our cave, stand on this little bridge and overlook the waterfall and the pond. That area was just a mud pit and we literally had to do a little trench to divert the water around it because the seeping never stopped. Full of mosses, full of ferns, total eye candy. This is a close-up of one of our living rocks that's in that seating area that you see when you get to the grotto. Prior to the pandemic, when we had much larger numbers of people that we'd bring down at one time, we were allowing some of these rocks to serve as benches to accommodate people as they kind of sat and rotated through. And once we slowed things down and kind of saw the way the place was reacting, once people were no longer on site, life was just springing forth from all of these rocks. And kind of just watched this happen, and it happens really quickly. And so we made a decision when we went back to our reservation system, fewer numbers, but kind of controlled setting, that we no longer wanted to disturb these places that were sustaining so much diversity. You can see the columbine and the maiden fern and all of these things, the moss is growing in this really small, tight little area. Sometimes we'll see a snake in there, we'll see birds, we'll see all kinds of things, using one singular rock to host all of these things. So we've let them be now as these little showcases when we get down there. And so water really is the engine of our canyon and of our grotto pond features. The rocks are seeping. Like I mentioned, we have a constant flow of water that feeds this place, but it's permeating through the canyon walls as well. It's helping us regulate our temperature down there. It's a battery for temperature control. It's really got all of those qualities that we need to maintain constant temperatures. The water itself is a constant 68 degrees. Some other conditions that I've entered into here is just the stump. Not that we don't have deadfall in the uplands as well, but the way that we manage it in the canyon is particularly sensitive because it is such an important part of the nutrient loading, preventing further erosive conditions and so forth to allow all of the amassing of biomass and soil and so forth down in the canyon. And some of the sampling, by no stretch am I trying to cover all of the things that you will find, but just to give you an idea of the biodiversity differences between the uplands and the grotto, for example, is we have 7 species of trees in the uplands, plus a number of grasses. And in the grotto, we have over 25 species of trees that we've identified. And because of the layered canopy conditions and all of the understory, the presence of water, just in general, the biodiversity difference between the uplands and the grotto is pretty profound. And of course, some endemic plants too that we're supporting. So John Arndt's legacy continues at Westcave. His daughter, Amber, is our conservation director today. She has been, I couldn't tell you what year she started, but she grew up on the property. She's really been here since, since she learned to walk and knows it better than anybody. And these are the things that she's really helping us and her team do, which is the proper land management techniques that protect, restore, and enhance the land, the habitat protection and enhancement that we spoke of. We do have a number of invasive and non-native management issues. We have the Nandina and viburnum and different things like this, vitex that's growing in the area, water quality protection, which is done in conjunction with other organizations to monitor Hines Branch Creek, but also the Pedernales River. When I was talking to her the other day, asking her, to just kind of explain what the conservation, experience really is, she was sharing just what tremendous responsibility she and her staff feel to have us interacting in this place, but that there's so much joy involved in the work. And, that's a really wonderful thing to hear, because you see how much they put into the work that they're doing and what it yields and result, that we have this really wonderful jewel of a place. I should mention too, as a preserve, one of the distinctions between us as a preserve and other places that you may be able to visit, like Hamilton Pool and Reimer's Ranch, is we don't recreate on our site. You might have people like you see in one of the pictures on the bottom out in our fields because they're monitoring, doing collection or citizen science, but otherwise it's trail access only. So these areas stay undisturbed. And that really does give us a great sense of reassurance that having us present with all of the other life that depends on this place, that we can cohabitate together. So one of the things that the conservation team does is every few years, a prescribed burn will happen out in the field to manage some of the invasives that we see, KR in particular. We have one scheduled this summer. I don't know the exact dates, but it's exciting to know that this is a calendar year for our next prescribed burn. Once we do these burns, we go and we do this kind of raking and seed disbursement, as you can see down in the left, to really try to get ahead of any remaining seed banks from the KR that could be there, and go in with an abundance of new seed banks. And we have a strategy too, where they do these 10 by 10 meter nodes that are kind of super saturated seeds. So as those come up, they have greater seed dispersal capability when they mature. You can see some of the other kinds of things, activities that are going on, checking. I don't actually know what they're doing in the third picture there. But the conservation work for volunteers is a really fantastic community social activity as well. And I know that we've had people coming out for 4 years, pretty connected to the site and to the community that's formed around our conservation work. some more of what Amber and her team do with the water quality, getting out on the pond, which is a pretty rare thing that they do, managing the invasive species removal, and even monitoring the conditions within our caves. We not only do a lot of research in the cave, but we're also monitoring for species and any other life that we might be able to have shelter in our cave systems. So we do have a number of volunteering and citizen science opportunities at Westcave. Our frog watch is always a really popular activity, as is the feeder watch. I think those slots go pretty quickly when they announce them, but it's a great way to kind of get involved and really explore the full breadth of the site. Also to kind of see how species are interacting with our native habitats. Again, we're looking at the conditions of this place. It's not just about the species itself, but the habitat that sustains it, and our native plant communities play a really important role in that. Dragonfly pond watch, lots of bird watching opportunities, including specialty bird hikes, bird counts, nest watch, our monarch way station. So lots of different ways to get involved. And there's a link, if Meg hasn't done it yet, since I can't see the chat, that actually helps you see how you might be able to get involved with volunteering or with research. Internships are a huge part of what makes the day-to-day possible at Westcave. If you know of anyone looking for an internship opportunity, whether it be conservation or with our education programs, we're always looking for interns. There's always a lot of work to be doing. We've been, rebuilding some of the gates around Orange Grove, up in the uplands, doing different seed collections, monitoring, trail maintenance, you name it. And for those of you that are master naturalists, some of the opportunities, that you might see there allow you to include the drive time to get out to Westcave. So just keep that in mind. But just interacting with the guests, helping us get guests checked in. And we have quite a long history too of volunteers helping to give our tours or leading a lot of our specialty hikes. So if you're a plant enthusiast that has really deep knowledge in an area and you want to be part of leading a special hike where we have the presence of the plant communities that you're knowledgeable about, this is a great opportunity for you to connect with us and get involved that way. So here are some of those dates. A couple of these have passed, but our next, the Wildflower Walk, you can see coming up March 21st at the bottom. These are a little out of order as they're showing, but this link will also go up in the chat if it hasn't already. And for those of you that just kind of want to see the just kind of where Westcave is in relation to a lot of the other parks and attractions in the area, you can see Westcave here kind of center left, Hamilton Pool, literally right across the creek and down the road about a mile away. Pedernal State Park isn't too far away. Reimer's Ranch, hugely popular destination. So we're kind of a trifecta between Westcave, Hamilton Pool Reserve, and Milton Reimer's Ranch. Hamilton Pool and Westcave both being on a reserve system right now. Lots of people getting bounced back to Reimer's Ranch. So I do highly encourage you to check out our site before coming out, to make plans to come out and get yourself on the calendar and book some tickets. Or come out for one of our specialty hikes and reserve that way. But just pulling up onto the property is a pretty unlikely chance, especially now with spring and it being so popular, that we'll have any openings. Our reservations really book up very, very fast this time of year. Here's my information and how to find me. I am more than happy to answer a few questions or let Meg and others take it from here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kathy. That was very, very informative, and I love that place so much. So it was a special treat for me to see. Kim, did you want to ask the questions that have been posted in chat?
As a person specifically focused on habitat, such as for Goldencheek Warbler, how do you view ash juniper management?
Great question. First, I'm going to just expose a bias. I love ash juniper trees. I love them so, so much. They are one of the most sculptural trees that we have. I'm fascinated by many of their strategies, just as an individual who's really curious about how they do all the things that they do. That said, Elizabeth McGreevy has a wonderful book out right now on mountain cedars that I highly recommend for everybody to get a really deep dive into all the things ash juniper. For us, what we really are cognizant of is that the mature, old growth ash juniper, these are the ones where the bark is really starting to shed. When they're younger trees, their barks aren't shedding, and left unmanaged because they don't have a lot of those same regulating pressures like the natural wildfires that would come through and other kinds of things to kind of keep this balance. They do tend to behave in a way that sets them up at the beginning of the succession pattern, more as a pioneer species to reestablish, because so much removal was done back when the area was settled, because the timber industry really saw it as a valuable commodity. The lumber has all of these great qualities for building and so forth because it doesn't rot and it's pest resistant. So it was used for building, for fence posts, utility poles, you name it. And so we've really kind of decimated a lot of our old growth ash juniper canopies. So we try to maintain what we can where we're seeing these older mature trees and managing the numbers of the younger trees behaving in ways that we now become that regulating pressure, if that makes sense. The other thing I'll say about ash junipers is that they support their own unique communities underneath those canopies, and they've always been growing in kind of these combined habitats with our live oaks and other trees. They're a native part of our landscape. So I think really it's just about interacting in a way that with intelligence about their place in the landscape, so that they can serve as they had.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Yes.
Alex Nelson asks, what is the biggest lesson you've learned in attempting to bridge the gap between communities and the environment?
One of the lessons that I am still continuing to try to impart is Westcave is seen as destination nature. I think people, especially Western society, where we've lost a lot of our connection to the outdoors, where it's kind of an othering of nature. We're really clever. We have beautiful spaces that we've created for ourselves. We are really fantastic designers, and we have, we haven't really been as humble with our own cleverness. We've moved to places and settled in places that clearly were natural attractions to us. They had all of the elements that we needed to survive. And then we kind of paved them over, right? But nature is still everywhere, and it wants to thrive, and it knows how to do it. Check out any crack in a sidewalk, and something is going to eventually find its way to thrive in that space. And so my lessons about nature are, what are the qualities about Westcave? What are the conditions that have allowed it to be so successful? And how can we start to identify these things in our own backyards, in the places that we visit every day, in the places that we travel to, so that destination nature becomes more of a learning laboratory for us, not a destination for a day where we walk away and we haven't really acquired any of the skills to assess the way that we can bring nature back in a much more healthy and symbiotic way in our day-to-day lives.
Right. So your yard is nature. That's what we take home from that. Are there any rare or endangered plants on the preserve?
Yes, we have a number. So the chinkapin oak that I mentioned earlier, eastern red bay, chatterbox orchids, green dragon. Amber and her father used to have a competition about who could spot it first. She hasn't seen one in a while. Dwarf palmetto down in our canyon, equisetum, which is the horsetail. I had an image of that earlier. Spice bush. We do have some leather flowers, and of course, a wide variety of ferns that we have down in our canyon as well.
What methods do you use for Nandina removal? Which I am really curious about that as well.
Oh, that's a great question. I don't do the direct conservation work. Like they just, produced all of their berries. And so I know that if we find them when they're fruiting, they would try to envelop all of that to capture, but it's full root removal when they pull them out.
Good.
And if there's anything more involved than that, I'll have to get back with you and try to follow up, but I don't know the full extent of that process.
Everybody wants to know how to get rid of those invasives.
Goats,
So-
I have goats.
Yeah. Where is the proposed Violet Crown Amphitheater development in relation to Westcave?
It's quite some distance away. That is closer to Bee Cave. So 71 and Southwest Parkway, more in that vicinity.
Okay, and thanks to Laura Leggett for asking that question.
I will say though, with relation to that, the concerns of light and sound pollution are a constant concern for us in the hill country. The amount of road noise alone that we see on Hamilton Pool Road now, especially on the weekends, as it becomes just that, Sunday drive. It's a really popular Sunday drive destination. It's a lot of noise, and the area is only continuing to get more developed. So we do share that concern because there's a lot of pristine habitat just to the east of where that's being proposed.
I see. Get a Pap wants to know, do you work with landscape architects, and what aspects of your work at Westcave is transferable to urban suburban backyards to expand the number of patches and corridors that support species of interest? Any special research outcomes? So a lot of questions.
I would say that the Wildflower Center and other places have been providing more of that degree of educational programming. We do interact with landscape architects, and they come to learn from Westcave all of the time. You see a lot of depictions of place that people are trying to kind of emulate in different ways, but that really hasn't been part of the mission that we do. Although I would suppose in the past, not since I've been around, but maybe pre-pandemic, they would have done some specialty workshops here and there to bring in outside experts to be the ones to kind of consult on that. But that's not something that our staff specifically does.
Rachel put in a reference to the Elizabeth McGreevy's book, and I think I would like to second the recommendation because she does a really good job of looking at the history of a tree and then talking about the full title is Mountain Cedar. What is it called, Kathy? It's
Wanted Dead or Alive Mountain Cedar.
Wanted Mountain Cedar, dead or alive. So alive, dead and alive.
Dead and alive, right.
He makes the case for both, and that we need to keep the species here. And just as Kathy, I think Kathy, you did a good job of responding to that question. So, and then Eli just added, do you have any recommended field guides for the area?
Why don't I? Yeah, I think there's probably a whole group of us here that that could have some field guides, and maybe just anyone that has any information, just populate that in the chat, and I'll certainly contribute as well.
Yeah.
The Discovering Westcave book, though, this is what it looks like. I am constantly referring to this about the geology, all of these underlying conditions, like the substrate for everything that we see around us just fascinates me to no end. But yes, I would ask everyone to put things into the chat because I want to know about field guides that maybe I'm not aware of.
Since I live in the area, I have every single field guide you could possibly want. But if somebody is interested in looking at, first of all, wildflowers, this is Marshall Inquist's book is going to be your best bet for this area. There, put it right in front of me. And then for people who are just getting into the field, these are good sort of starter books of Jan Reed wrote Trees, Shrubs, and Vines of the Texas Hill Country. And then also Brian and Shirley Laughlin wrote about the grasses of the Texas Hill Country. Now there's certainly more in-depth books that are available, but those would be some books to start out with. And I guess I could send the resource list out with the links to the videos. I'll make
that would be super. Kathleen, Patricia wants to know, Aldrich wants to know if you could please tell us a personal story of your working in Westcave.
Oh, and I just want to say, you can find our book on site if you go, or you can buy it online. Someone asked that question. I just saw that. Oh, goodness. You know, I think all of us really share a love of interacting with our visitors when we do tours together. That wasn't what I was hired to do. I fill in every once in a while to do it. And every single time I do, the interactions, whether it's with someone that's been there, you know, countless times, someone there for the first time alone or with their children, that sense of wonder that people see, the stories that, you know, that they walk away with as they're kind of processing and sharing their reactions with you. It really can't be beat. There's something about being in a place that you so innately understand is what we want to see in the world, and how rare it is to be able to find these places intact, especially because going down into the grotto is such an unexpected visual when you first encounter it. You know, you know that you're going somewhere special, but you just can't quite imagine what it is until you get there. And hearing people kind of talk about it and sharing some of those lessons with them, I would say, just lights me up every time.
Okay. Talat Shaw would like to know, do you know if Indigenous populations have some belief about the quote unquote magical nature of the area, and are any Indigenous groups involved in the conservation process?
No, but they should be, right? Yeah, they should be. And I know that we share that desire. And so if anyone knows anyone that wants to be interacting with us, we welcome that introduction. I can't speak to about their beliefs about the place. You know, we have evidence of their presence in the area, but because the canyon itself is such a volatile terrain, you know, a lot of the history of place, you know, gets removed and washed away. It wasn't a place that anyone would dwell. It was a place to go and forage. And that's true for a lot of wildlife as well, right? It's you go down, you forage, and then you leave. Of course, it is native habitat to a lot of our snakes and reptiles, amphibians and so forth. But that's just a long-winded way of saying I should know more.
I was there recently in November, and it was just, I'd never heard of it. It was beautiful. I recommend it for everyone. It's so lovely. And I like that you have the group small going in there, then everyone gets a chance to really experience it and go into both the little caves. It's wonderful. And I'm sad your interpretive center was not open, but maybe next time.
It will be opening now that we're stage 2. We are clear to open it back up. So we're just going to dust it off and get it ready for you.
Oh, and on your prairie area, you have a lot of really unique and wonderful bird lines too for birders.
We do. We do. The bird areas, because we have watering and feed stations there, they're right there, and it's always a flurry of activity. It's pretty special when we actually go and set those out because they're waiting for us. You know, it's a really wonderful experience. And we have guides right there too. So if you don't know what you're looking at, all of the information is handy and it's right there.
I want to share a personal experience. We had, I was asked by my daughter's 3rd grade teacher to organize a field trip. And so we went to Westcave Reserve before it changed its name. And so imagine 25 third graders walking down that pathway to the grotto very quietly and very carefully and very respectfully. And then we're all sitting around the grotto pool, and what should happen but a water moccasin should start swimming around. I thought that was great. And of course, nobody panicked. They just all sat and watched the water moccasin, and it just swam around and gave us a show and then went away. So it's a really special place. Anyway, enough of that. I really, really appreciate you giving this presentation on Westcave. It's hopefully we will have boosted your attendance over the next year with this presentation.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.